Hold on, didn't you already talk about Kingdom Hearts 1? But what's with these cards in the bottom left corner? What's with the room layout? And what's with this world map? What is this? If you've never played Chain of Memories before, these are probably some of the questions you might have. Let me explain. After the success of the first Kingdom Hearts, Square and Nomura got to work on a sequel. However, it wasn't the sequel that everyone was expecting. Feedback was given that kids wanted to play Kingdom Hearts on the go, although the only portable system at the time was the Game Boy Advance. Wait, hold on. I hear you ask. Game Boy Advance? What are you talking about? The clips you showed at the beginning were definitely not from the Game Boy Advance. Oh yes, dear viewer, Chain of Memories was originally a Game Boy Advance game. Only later it got remade for the PlayStation 2, alongside Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix and then released on its own, and then it was bundled with the HD collection. Most people, when they talk about this game, talk about the PlayStation 2 remake, only mentioning the GBA original. But me, I wanted the GBA original to be the focus of this video. Truth be told, I have more experience and nostalgia with the PlayStation 2 remake than this one. Honestly, I knew little to none going into this game, but I really wanted to try it out. I don't really have any sort of capture card for my Game Boy Advance, so for recording, I had to resort to emulation. Now, I did play the game on the original hardware just to get an impression of how the game actually plays, and I will do that for any other Kingdom Hearts games that aren't available to play on the HD collection. But we'll get into all that. For now, let's dive right in. Alright, Chain of Memories. It's a game about cards and memories. It's kind of in the title. When you first look at the game, you may think, why? Why did they create a fully canon game on the Game Boy Advance? Why the cards? Why, when they remade it, did they keep the cards? And why do the Disney worlds feel so disconnected and pointless? It sure does feel like the black sheep of the series. Compared to the rest, it sticks out like a sore thumb. To new people, the game looks, intimidating, not fun, a bad time, off-putting. The card-based gameplay can be a real turnoff for most players, especially when other games are so action-based and this one seems so strategy-based. With having to break cards and knowing when to put cards down and not to put down cards, it all looks so weird. But for now, let's get back to those questions I proposed. Why this game? The secret ending to Kingdom Hearts 1 hinted at something much more awesome and cool, not cards and memories. Let's get inside the heads of the creators for a minute. What were they trying to accomplish with this? They had plans for something much bigger than this, that much is obvious, but you couldn't just drop us in on that idea. You'd confuse the player and they'd be asking, what is this and how did I get here? So they needed a bridge of sorts to not only connect the two ideas, but to set up the new one. Unfortunately, most people ended up getting confused anyway because this released on different hardware than the original. Much different hardware, which means most players of the original didn't play it. And may I remind you, this game is 100% canon. It quite literally takes place right after the first game. It's so funny to me that a series known for being all over the place in terms of story and the fact that the story relevant games are on different consoles got its start right here at the second game, literally right out of the gate. I'm pretty sure that's a lot of people's complaints about this series until the compilations, but by then the damage was already done. Locking off important bits of your story behind completely different consoles is a bad idea, and there really is not much good about it in practice. In theory, however, it does make a bit more sense. The fact that you are putting a game on a handheld does give you the opportunity to focus more of the world building aspect rather than the raw storytelling that you want to do with bigger titles. It gives you a chance to use a smaller size story to set up a much bigger story beat. In theory. Unfortunately, that's not how most people will look at it. Like, you expect people to just drop hundreds of dollars on several different consoles just to get the full story? Let's not forget this game came out on the Game Boy Advance when the one before came on the PlayStation 2. Two drastically different consoles. Originally, to get the full story, you had to go from console to console. In my opinion, the story really isn't that hard to follow. And I feel like a lot of things said about Kingdom Hearts' convoluted story come from the fact that each new piece of the puzzle came out on a new piece of hardware. Nowadays, we have the HD collections everywhere, and as of the recording of this video, we have Nintendo Switch versions coming, although they are in the form of cloud versions, which is a discussion for a different time. It makes it really easy for newcomers, thank God. But the original fans didn't have the story all at once. They were getting in bits and pieces. There weren't a ton of videos like there are today explaining the story, and a lot of them gave up on trying to understand it. But even then, the sheer size of the Kingdom Hearts library of games and story to wrap around your head can be intimidating. Truthfully though, if you don't want to play the other games before playing the most recent one, there's plenty of YouTube videos explaining the story. But here's the thing, should you have to go to an outside source just to get a grasp on the story? No, you shouldn't have to. And it's a little demanding to require the player to play a bunch of side games to know what's going on. But that's the world we live in today. I will definitely hit this topic again, and in greater detail. And honestly, I might just take all the thoughts I have on it and make it into an entirely new video. But for now, where was I? Right. Answering the question of why. Why this game? Well, there are a few things that we need to consider. Number one, they needed to be able to set up the next big idea, that is Kingdom Hearts 2. They needed a connection of sorts, a bridge, if you will. So it needed to be a little bit of a smaller game. Number two, if you remember what I said earlier, feedback was given that kids wanted to play Kingdom Hearts on the Game Boy Advance. So they needed to replicate Kingdom Hearts' gameplay as best they could on that hardware. Finally, number three, because it's Kingdom Hearts, they needed to incorporate Disney in some fashion. With those points in mind, let's talk about them. One thing to consider when talking about this is that these may seem like individual points, but there is some overlap in all of them. For example, the fact that this is a smaller size story makes it so that it was easier to put on the Game Boy Advance, or it could be the other way around. They all do affect each other in one way or the other, just something to keep in mind. So besides setting up the next big title in the series, there were a few things they needed to do to accomplish that. They needed for Sora to be at level 1 again, despite all the experience he gained in the previous entry. So how does Chain of Memories do this? By having Sora literally forget every move and spell he's ever learned. And that sounds lazy and weak, but it works. By having the place itself be the thing that has the effect of forgetting, or so it seems at first, just works for the story. In fact, it's actually pretty compelling. This opening scene with Sora walking up to Castle Oblivion has a very mysterious feeling. It's funny though, they put Sora at level 1 just to put him back at level 1 at the end, because you do need to play through the game and you do need to level up. Although you could argue that Sora never actually learns any moves or spells for himself, he just draws those powers out of the cards. So did he ever really truly leave his base state? That's for you to decide. This game's main purpose is to set up Kingdom Hearts 2, and it does a good job at it. It not only gives Kingdom Hearts 2 an excuse for Sora to start at level 1, but it also hints at what the future might hold. It introduces new characters and antagonists, Naminé and the Organization 13 to be specific. At this point, we don't even know what a nobody is or any of that, so they all come off as very mysterious. Naminé especially. There are so many questions that come with this character that just don't get answered here, which is not a bad thing. Gotta leave the audience wanting more after all. But questions like who she even is, why does she have these powers in the first place, where did she come from, how did the organization get a hold of her? As a matter of fact, what is the organization? These questions aren't answered here, and that's great. It's all part of the setup. This game isn't here to answer questions, it's here to create questions to be answered later. It's here to introduce new ideas, give you just enough info for you to be invested, and point you to the next title for more. And the mystery of it all just compels you to keep playing. Which is good, because the gameplay, on the other hand, can be a little bit off-putting. I know it was for me when I first found out about this game. But why the cards? Well, they wanted to make the game on the Game Boy Advance, that much we've already established. They also wanted to be able to replicate Kingdom Hearts 1 gameplay in some fashion. So does Chain of Memories succeed in doing that? To answer that, let's talk about how it plays. The game style is a mix of a real-time action RPG and turn-based RPG. It's turn-based in the sense that you have an overworld of sorts. Then when you strike an enemy or run into an enemy, you start a battle. The overworld is split into square rooms of each world. These rooms aren't just boring square rooms, they each have traits to them. Let me explain. Each room has doors in them. When you walk up to these doors, you must use a room card to open it. Each room card has different attributes, and they are separated into 3 categories: red, green, and blue cards. Red cards affect Heartless and room size, like Tranquil Darkness is a standard card that has no special effect and just a few Heartless appear. A card like Teeming Darkness will make the room bigger and more Heartless will appear. Green cards affect the way you interact with Heartless battles, like Martial Waking will increase the numbers of all your attack cards, Sorceress Waking will increase your magic cards, and Alchemist Waking will increase your item cards. A card like Meeting Ground will make it so there will always be a friend card at the beginning of each battle. We'll get into how battles work in a second. Blue cards will will give you some sort of chest bounty or save point. Like Calm Bounty makes it so that a chest appears in the room with no enemies. Moment's Reprieve will make it so a save point appears in the room with no enemies. You can also have Moogle rooms, which are where a Moogle appears and you can buy new attack, magic, or item cards. Going through each world will bring you to several story doors. Key of Beginnings, Key of Guidance, Key to Truth. These are your story progression doors. They will bring you to the next event in the story within that particular world. Key to Truth will always bring you to the final encounter of that world. You may also come across Key to Rewards rooms, which may hold a special card or a new ability. That's the overall part of the gameplay. The battle system is a little different. See, every time you walk into an enemy or hit an enemy, you start a battle. Battles usually have 1 to 3 waves of enemies, and they don't necessarily have to have the enemies that you encountered in the overworld. Enemies in this game are all from Kingdom Hearts 1, with a few new ones thrown in. In battle, you have battle cards. This right here is probably the biggest turnoff for most people. The only way for you to do any sort of offensive move is for you to select a card from your deck, whether it be an attack, magic, or item throwing card. You have a variety of cards to choose from to create your deck. This is honestly one of my favorite parts of the game. Customizing your deck the way you like it is just so much fun. I'd compare it to the gummy building from Kingdom Hearts 1. Cards are sorted by number, 1 through 9, with all different CP or card points. The higher the card value, the higher the CP. Unless you have a 0 card, which has the highest CP of all your cards. You have a limit on your CP, which can be increased with leveling up. So you need to plan out the way you want your deck to look based upon how much CP you have. If you want to fill your deck up with 9s, you can do it as long as you have enough CP. When you do level up, you have a choice between HP, CP, and sometimes a slate. I usually go for CP because here's the thing, CP matters more. The way the battle system works is that when you play a card, the enemy has a chance to play their card, and if their card is higher, it can break yours and vice versa. 0 cards will break any card, but it can be broken by any card. They're valuable to have, especially if you put them in a place where you can access them easily. Once you run out of cards, you can charge them to bring them back, but each time you do, it takes more time to do so. It only goes up to 3, so it's not too bad. You can also bring back used cards by using an item card. Potions will bring back attack cards, ethers can bring back magic cards, and elixirs do both. So by itself, that doesn't seem very fun and it's not very engaging, but you can also stock cards. Stocking cards puts them in the left corner to be stored in groups of 3, adding all their values together to make one big number that, if it's high enough, can only be beaten by an enemy's higher stock card or a 0 card. This is how you pull off slates. Slates are the big special attacks like Sonic Blade, Ars Arcanum, Blitz, and it's how you get different levels of magic. For example, if you play 1 fire card, it will be regular fire. If you stock 2 fire cards, it will be Fyra. And if you stock 3 fire cards, you get Fyraga. That's not the only magic you can pull off in this game. There are a variety of magic slates that are really powerful. There's a catch though. Every time you use stock cards, the first card in the stock is gone until the battle is over. So if you do use this, you'll eventually run out of cards. You can use any item card above a regular potion or ether to bring back those cards, but once the item card is used, they're gone. Now, I rarely went past 2 cycles on cards, so it wasn't really a problem for me, but something to keep in mind. You also have friend cards, which summon Donald, Goofy, or whatever Disney character you're teamed up with in that world to do an attack. You also have summon cards, which are all summons from the first game and basically do what they did in that one, except altered to better fit this game. Although I think Cloud is the only summon that wasn't in the first game. I stuck to only a few of these and didn't use the rest, so just use whatever you think would work best in your deck. You then have enemy cards, which are cards you can equip during battle to give you a buff of some kind. Like the Shadow card increases the values of your cards by 1, or the Oogie Boogie card that restores HP over time. You get these dropped randomly from regular enemies and always from boss fights. These do take up CP, so if you want it, you'll need to craft your deck around them. Regular enemy encounters and bosses operate differently from each other. Some bosses do operate like enemies where they can only put 1 card down at a time, but there are bosses, particularly the organization fights, that have a deck like yours and you'll need to take a slightly different approach to them. In all honesty, you can just use slates, you just need to strategically place them, but sometimes it's just easier to hit them with normal attacks and just have a 0 card ready to put down. That's Sora's gameplay. Riku's gameplay is a little different. Same concept, use cards to pull off attacks, but different execution. See, Riku's gameplay has more of an emphasis on breaking enemy cards than anything else. With every card break, you build up a meter that once filled activates D mode. The only way to pull off slates is in this mode, and Riku's attacks become different and faster. The other change is that you can't customize your deck at all. Each world gives you a deck that you just need to work with, and sometimes they straight up give you a garbage deck. Like in Wonderland, not only is the deck small, but my highest card is a 5. To put that in perspective, some enemies can pull off 6s, making it so that you have to stock cards to beat them. But you still lose cards when you stock them, and they don't give you a high potion or anything to bring those cards back. So yeah, this world sucks. You have Mickey as your only friend card, and he acts as your heal/potion because they don't give you a healing card. And only with a few decks do they give you any sort of potion or restore cards. Overall, Riku's story is shorter because you're not going through any story in the worlds, just get to the progression door, beat the boss, and leave. And that's the combat. It doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun, but let you in on a little secret. I actually really like this game. Now, I will say it gets pretty repetitive, especially if you played it twice through like I did. The combat starts out a little slow and you don't have any slates, but over time you get more cards, more slates, and I started to have fun with the game. It can feel a little spammy, and it's not a game I want to play every chance I get because it's super repetitive, but when I do want to play it, I usually have a blast. So we've talked about the general story, the gameplay, but how about them Disney worlds? Let's get something straight here. The Disney worlds aren't so much worlds as they are simulations, or illusions as the game likes to call them. I prefer simulations based upon Sora's memories of them in the first game. The worlds play out in a similar manner as they did in the first game, I guess. Here's the thing. In these worlds, nobody knows who Sora is, but I'm not completely sure if Sora knows who they are back. See, in the Traverse Town simulation, Sora knows who everyone is, even though they don't because they're just part of the simulation. It takes Sora back, but I guess he gets the hang of everyone not knowing who he is because in other worlds, he acts as if it's the first time they met. It's weird, but it can be explained away, I guess. They also aren't connected to the main story in any solid way. I mean, they may comment on what's going on in the main story, but in a roundabout way. And Sora won't bring anything to them from the main story, and he doesn't take anything away from them in any meaningful way. Although they do give a little bit of foreshadowing. Like in Traverse Town, Aerith tells Sora to beware his memories. When Sora presses for more, she just tells him the truth is out of her reach because she's just another illusion. Or maybe it's just a commentary about how we're part of the simulation and we'll never know the truth because the simulation won't let us. What happened? I think I blacked out there. Oh well. In between worlds, Sora, Donald, and Goofy will have a chat about their situation, and it will never be about what they just witnessed in the previous world. They usually just go on about how the castle is affecting them in general, which I guess makes sense because the game is designed for you to pick which world you want to take on from the worlds available to you at that time, so not referring to the simulation you just left would make the storytelling that much harder, I guess. I don't know, maybe they could have done something, but what do I know? We've talked a lot about the Game Boy Advance original, but you can't talk about this game without at least mentioning the remake. After Kingdom Hearts 2 came out, Square released Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, much like they did with Kingdom Hearts 1. With that game was bundled Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories, a remake of the GBA original released on the PS2. It was later released by itself overseas because we never got Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. So what are the differences? Well, besides the obvious that it's in full 3D now, Square went ahead and made some updates to the overall game. There were some script changes, some stuff makes sense like Axel commit it to memory, to the much more well-known
got it memorized,
but then some just don't, like the scene where Sora just fought Riku for the first time and he's all sad about it. In the GBA original, he actually does some silly stuff to cheer himself up. In the remake, Donald, Goofy, and Jiminy just tell him essentially everything's gonna be okay and that's that. Not sure why that needed to be changed, but whatever. The Disney simulations got hit the worst. The script for the most part remains unchanged, but they went ahead with a speech bubble cutscene route rather than the full voice acting the rest of the scenes got, which makes sense because they only had such a big budget, but it makes them feel even more disconnected than they originally did because now there's no voice, just speech bubbles. But again, they probably just didn't have the budget for it, which is sad, but there's not a whole lot you can do. The other big change is gameplay. Now that they're in 3D, you'd think they just dropped the card mechanic because it was just a result of the limitations of the GBA and they just go with a more traditional Kingdom Hearts battle system. Well, no, they didn't. They kept the whole card mechanic in all its glory. I guess they did that because it would lose its identity if it did. I'm not going to complain because it does fit better than you might think. Some of the slates were also changed, such as Firaga Break becoming Firaga Burst. There's also this one slate with Donald where, according to the description, he flubs a fire spell. What he does is he lights himself on fire off screen and runs around damaging enemies. In the remake, you get this cooler but not nearly as funny slate with him. This is the first game
game that was handled by the Osaka team. See, after Kingdom Hearts 2, the Kingdom Hearts series was given to a different team to produce, the Osaka team. Here's the thing about the Osaka team. Their games tend to have a certain feel to them. This won't be the last time this comes up, but their games just feel floaty. Let me explain. See, in the first game, Sora would do an air combo and snap straight to the ground with a little landing leg. What this allows for is for you to do a follow-up right after. Now, when you did finish a combo, you would stay in the air a little bit, but just enough to finish out the combo. See, in this game, when Sora does an attack, he just kind of hangs there for a second and then falls. See, this wouldn't be so bad if you could do another attack right after, but there's a good bit of end lag when you're in the air like that, so you end up taking hits that could have been avoided if you just snapped to the ground. There is another problem that persists throughout the game, and that is slates are just way too broken. You can just spam slates and win the vast majority of fights. Now, the original was a little spammy, but it is way more noticeable here. Take these Riku battles for instance. He is such a pushover if you have Sonic Blade. Just spam that and he can't do anything. You can just do that throughout the whole fight. And just so you know, this works for most boss fights. The only other complaint I have about this is that the game goes with this spammy mentality, but then it throws bosses at you that completely disrupt that formula. So you've trained yourself to spam, and you can't do that with some of these bosses. It's a little weird, but I don't know. I wish the game did a better job of teaching you how to actually use the card system properly rather than just putting you in situations where spam is the best option. The last change that was made was to the key to rewards room. If you have completed the cutscenes for the 358 over 2 days movie, or if you have Kingdom Hearts 2 save data on your memory card if you're playing on the PS2, the other organization member cards start appearing in those rooms. They just operate like enemy cards and give you buffs that weren't in the original game. Riku's gameplay got one big overhaul, and that is this card break minigame. When you match your enemy's card, you play a game where you try to beat the cards that they put down. If you succeed, you get to pull off a powerful attack. If you fail, you get stunned for a really long time, while the enemy gets to attack you. This breaks Riku's story in half. I use this for the vast majority of fights because it's just that good. I, for the most part, strictly use this for boss fights, especially the final boss. He's an absolute pushover using this strategy. This alone makes this version a completely different experience from the GBA version, and frankly is really what makes Riku's gameplay different from Sora's. Whether that's a good or bad thing is really up to you. Although I will say it still adds to the fact that the game is super spammy.
Chain of Memories is just a weird game overall. Some like it, some hate it, but it does a great job of setting up the next big title, and the gameplay does a great job of bypassing the Game Boy Advance's limitations to give us as close of a Kingdom Hearts experience as possible on that hardware. And while it was a great idea to put the game on PlayStation 2 to give players a chance to play it who didn't play the original, it falls short because the slates are just too powerful and the game is just way too spammy. And the Disney worlds just suck overall in both of them. But it does do its job setting up Kingdom Hearts 2, which is the game we'll be talking about next time in this series. I've been Travelopolis, and you guys take it easy and stay awesome.